Now, for those of you that are just enjoying a bite to eat, obviously we're going to have a little break in the middle of our virtual lunch break, even though it's dinner time here and it's probably breakfast time still over in the west coast of the States. But these events would not happen without our platinum sponsors and our sponsors altogether. But today, one of our key sponsors has been our platinum sponsor, which is Fastly. And I'm going to just have a brief chat now with Chris Buckley, who's a senior sales engineer from Fastly. Chris, are you out there? You just fiddle with the mute buttons. There we go. Chris, are you there?
Yeah.
Perfect. And if I cancel the spotlight on the video, we can all see you. Give us another hello.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. Chris Buckley here.
Excellent. Chris, tell us a little bit about yourself and about Fastly.
Yeah, sure thing. So my name is Chris Buckley. I'm a senior sales and solutions engineer at Fastly, and I primarily focus on the media and entertainment verticals. So I work with a lot of our sort of largest video and streaming customers. Before I worked at Fastly, I used to run infrastructure and DevOps at Business Insider, and so we were responsible for sending millions of viral, social, and also breaking news videos to the world, on a daily basis. And I guess before that, I worked at a hosting company where we had a bunch of Red 5 and Wowzer and Flash Media Server boxes up and running, streaming RTMP and RTP to stuff like Flash-based players. So I've had a little bit of experience in the online side.
Perfect. Excellent. So tell us a little bit about the primary challenges and the technical and commercial ones that service providers are facing as they work to reduce their time, as they work to reduce their time behind live streaming and so on.
Yeah, sure thing, Dom. It really kind of depends on the industry and what their latency and time behind live needs are. So, there's a couple of different definitions out there. So when we talk about low latency, the generally accepted time period is sort of 4 to 10 seconds behind live. When we start getting into ultra low latency, we're talking 1 to 4 seconds behind live. And then, of course, we've got sort of sub-second latency, so a few hundred milliseconds. In the sports and sort of esports kind of industries, they're not so much focused on being ultra low latency. Yes, they would like to be as close to live as possible, but not ultra low latency. Really, it's more about being in lockstep with the traditional broadcast workflows. As they were going into in the last talk a little bit. And broadcast workflows, have introduced latency into their workflows, basically for regulatory purposes, FCC regulations, all that kind of stuff. So, the thing with sort of live broadcast sports and esports is really trying to keep broadcast and OTT, in step. Really what I've been seeing and what we've been seeing in the industry a lot is more and more people are concerned with being behind social rather than being behind glass.
Right.
So, you have a big audience, a big event with a live audience, and they're tweeting that there's a touchdown. They're tweeting that there's a penalty kick, that kind of stuff. So, OTT broadcasters are really looking at how to beat that. And I actually haven't seen a very good workaround for that so far. Then we have sort of the interactive and UGC type folks, and I'm throwing kind of gambling and live auctioning into this as well. Interactive content isn't really focused on as much being in real time, but it is concerned with everybody getting the same content at the same time. Again, sort of lockstep, right? So companies like HQ Trivia, they did a really good job of syncing their interactive stuff. So actually the real-time quizzes with the video content across users and platforms. So different cell phones, different formats, all that kind of stuff, and they did really well with that. Philo last year, they presented at Demuxed regarding sort of live watch parties and how that would work. And they had some really interesting ideas about how to do things like timeline sync, timeline catch up, for people who are falling behind, that kind of thing. And then you've got people like Sotheby's, who have been doing sort of like phone it in bidding for years. And they've started doing live streaming and they're really focusing on trying to keep that in lockstep. And then when we talk about sub-second latency, right? So what we're really talking about is stuff like real-time video. So things like video chats, teleconferencing, what we're doing right now. So as we've seen, in the last couple of months, there's been a huge uptick in the usage and the need for services such as Zoom, BlueJeans, etc. But there's also been some really public security incidents about this stuff, recently, and the term like Zoom bombing has become this thing that people are now needing to protect against. And it seems fairly unique to conferencing. I don't think that people are running into HQ trivia or a Sotheby's auction and, doing bad actor type things. Um,
Reminds me of the Rolling Stones having their stream hacked in 1993, I think it was.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
Zoom bomb.
Yeah, like anonymous takeovers of streams and all sorts of crazy stuff. Um, but that's sort of on the how do you protect against bad actors type side. But when you talk about ultra low, sub-second latency, I should say, the complications more become around audio, right? So streaming complications get worse, and broadcasting complications get worse as you have very distributed latency, right? Like you and me, we might be next door to each other in a Zoom meeting, but we might have someone in Australia, someone in South Africa, etc. So as you have these varying latencies and round trip times and all that kind of stuff, protecting against things like echo or doing noise cancellation, those sort of things, they become more and more difficult. And I think that, I haven't got a lot of information about that because I think for a lot of streaming, broad conferencing type software, that's sort of their secret sauce, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of how the different industries are sort of tackling and the challenges they face.
I'd be half surprised if half the people in the conference today haven't been approached by friends who are musicians trying to jam on Zoom and struggling with latency. So anyway, that's a different.
I've actually done it myself, and you do get into a groove. I'm sure that we're not in the same groove, but we are in some sort of groove.
Brilliant. Okay, so tell us about the bottlenecks in delivering content over HTTP at scale, and which ones are the most problematic, and how can technology and industry standards alleviate those challenges?
So I work for a content delivery network, so most of my experience is in unicast. So I'm probably going to sort of focus there. The guys on the last panel did a great job talking about latency for things like multicast 5G. So I'm not going to touch on those things today. But yeah, because most of us consume video via unicast over the internet, the general internet weather is a huge issue, right? Different regions with varying latency, connection speeds, etc., can cause issues trying to deliver a smooth experience close to live to everyone. Different CDNs, edge compute, edge delivery networks, they have different offerings. So being able to combine them all can kind of be problematic. And before it even gets online or gets to being chunks that we can send down the line, traditional satellite broadcast systems are extremely expensive to own and operate. And starting a new, like end-to-end satellite system, we're talking millions and millions and millions of dollars, right? So some of the things that we've seen to try and get around some of these bottlenecks, some of the broadcast networks are starting to look at something like Quick or HTTP3 as a possible transport layer to replace traditional satellite networks, right? It's a lot cheaper. The performance, like UDP, and when we're talking stuff like multicast, Quick has a lot of controls built into it, but also because it's UDP, we can just fire away and kind of forget about it. WebRTC has got a lot of attentions these days, particularly in the ultra low and sub-second latency ranges. And there are a bunch of working groups dedicating to look at how to scale up WebRTC, for Super Bowl or World Cup style events. That usually involving some CDNs or building some WebRTC nodes in the cloud, that kind of stuff to sort of help with the scale. But that's definitely happening as well. On the HTTP side of things, the latency, HLS, for example, was not designed to be low latency. We were in the original spec, it was 10-second chunks. You want to keep 3 chunks, in buffer. So even before we start playing something, we've got 30 seconds of latency from wherever we've started in the broadcast. We've had communities come up with workarounds like this, and you've got things like LHLS, the community sort of low latency HLS spec, and you've got the low latency CMAF dash initiative, which was briefly touched about in the last talk as well. And these are both using a tried and true standard of HTTP 1.1 content transfer encoding. So that means that we can start sending segments down to the end user before it's fully written. And that's really helping to reduce time behind live. Some of the issues with chunk transfer encoding is that things like bandwidth estimation for adaptive bitrate streaming becomes more difficult, because in chunk transfer encoding, if you have a 10-second segment, it could very well take 10 seconds to deliver to you, and that doesn't actually give you a very good estimate on what your bandwidth uh, is. Um, and then we have the new Apple low latency HLS spec, and that's the new hotness. Everyone's working towards that. It's a bit of a moving target, as it gets developed and they work with the community. A lot of the community really just wanted chunk transfer encoding rather than the segment parts that Apple put, but that's the way that Apple has gone. They like to do the things that they like to do. And this introduces new challenges, particularly for edge vendors and cloud providers such as Fastly, right? So, updates to playlists and segment parts being published every 200 milliseconds to 300 milliseconds. Like, how do you cache that? Most caching software out there can't cache below 1 second, or maybe even greater than that. So how do you cache it, if at all? And that's why stuff like request blocking or request collapsing are so important and part of that spec, because it does help to reduce the origin traffic. And fortunately, Fastly is well poised to help to deliver that, because we've supported, request blocking for a long time.
So I think you've answered some of the points on the next question already, but feel free to add to them. So how are technology companies working to empower their customers to solve these problems?
Yeah, these two questions, I know I kind of covered a bunch of content, but I'll try and keep it fresh here. So look, there are a bunch of companies out there that are currently working to help build new products and workflows for low latency, right? So what I've noticed recently is there have been a lot more sort of partnerships come out for end-to-end workflows for low latency. It's actually really hard for companies these days to wade through all of the different vendors, all of the different offerings, the different cloud providers to try and, okay, I'll take this piece from here and I'll band-aid it to this, and then I'll send it over here. And, and that's really hard for people to kind of get into. So, providing these end-to-end kind of workflows with companies just saying like, take this and use it, that's really helping drive people to be able to do some stuff, in the encoding kind of space, you've got companies like Videon, which are making these tiny little compact, pretty powerful little encoders, that you could just stack on a camera, and it's got HDMI out, or it's got Ethernet out, or whatever, and you can just whack that on the side of a camera and stream low latency chunk transfer encoding, Dash and HLS right from the camera. So that's kind of awesome, and also the price point reduces the barrier of entry. You've got companies such as Wowzer, which are fully supporting the new low latency HLS spec for delivery. Elemental has supported chunk transfer encoding for both Dash and HLS for a while now. And you've got people like TheoPlayer, which are bringing out low latency HLS support in their players. So you're starting to get all of the pieces. You've got the CDN, which can deliver it. You've got the encoders, which can create it. You've got the players, which you can consume it. So we're starting to get all the pieces there together. And then you've got working groups such as the Streaming Video Alliance that are also working together to build out workflows, best practices, documentation for low latency live.
Perfect.
So, yeah.
Excellent. So, and how can people educate themselves and stakeholders outside of the technology function to invest further in this area?
I mean, so, the biggest thing is really to join the communities. I'm constantly amazed at how big and how flourishing the online video dev community is, right? You've got the Slacks, they're doing online virtual meetups, such as this. Those are the guys that have got the boots on the ground, really testing the stuff, and pushing ideas out. So just getting educated is a good way. Again, the Streaming Video Alliance, some of the stuff that they're putting out is really good. You've got varying industry mailing lists, of which Streaming Media Conference has one, and a magazine. And they continue to publish new use cases for low latency and innovation. And innovation is really the word that you have to keep in your brain when you're pitching it to non-business, non-technical types, right? Stakeholders want innovation in the space. They want to be different from someone else. So being able to find those unique use cases that apply to your business That's how you're going to get buy-in for it, right? The price continues to drop, which means that the barrier of entry keeps getting easier. So you can just keep your ear to the ground, for developments, or you can get involved. Talk with vendors such as ourselves about your goals. We are supposed to be subject matter experts in these kind of fields. So talk to your vendors, talk to potential vendors, talk to me. About the things you can do to maybe pitch into stakeholders. Um, and also getting help outside of sort of your core competency. Maybe your team isn't great at building low latency workflows. Going outside, getting some kind of people to help you build it, that can help speed up time to market, reduces complexity, because the one thing that stakeholders hate is when you propose an ultra complicated solution, right? So that just kills projects, it kills initiatives, and once an idea is dead, it's dead, you know. Uh, and so that's kind of the main things.
Perfect. Well, listen, obviously the other thing to do is attend excellent events such as Content Delivery Summit, which brilliant sponsors such as the platinum sponsor for today, Fastly, are sponsoring. So that was a little
Absolutely.
interlude, everyone. Thanks very much, Chris.
No, thank you very much for allowing me to speak today.